Our guest, Brian Kahn, is the managing editor of Earther and lecturer of Columbia's Masters at Climate and Society. Yesterday, there was this unprecedented escalation in the fight for climate justice. As you've heard, I'm sure, Greta Thunberg and 15 other young people filed a potentially world-changing climate complaint. It states that the world governments are violating children's rights under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. The teenage plaintiffs who filed the complaint are from all over the world, and each has dealt with the stifling impacts of climate change. We're going to be speaking with Brian Kahn about that in the second half of the show. But I just think that it's important that we know that NOAA has predicted a warmer than average, temperatures leading up to the entire, all the way through December.
You mean the biblical guy, Noah?
Yes. Yes, I do. I mean that guy. Okay, so the main story that's going on today, I was watching the news last night. It's breaking news after breaking news after breaking news. Rudy Giuliani says that the State Department, so I don't know how far behind we all are, because it's 7 a.m. I don't know who stayed up how late to watch this breaking news, but basically, have you been following, King? What's going on?
I went to bed early for a change.
Good man. Well, we get up early. So basically, Trump was said to have frozen aid to the Ukraine before his call with its leader. He ordered his staff to freeze more than $391 million in aid before he spoke with Ukraine's president, two senior officials said. And my husband's response was, we sent $391 million to the Ukraine. So there was that response. But, earlier amid growing calls for impeachment, Trump denied the accusations that he withheld the money to force the Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden. These revelations come as leading congressional Democrats demanded that the administration turn over documentation about the matter. And there's growing impeachment calls. There were, I believe, 7 freshman senators who called for impeachment, and these are senators who have had and representatives who have had deep background in intelligence and military operations. So they're saying, yeah, I wasn't going to call for impeachment until now. So the fact that they have come out, and you can read their letter that I believe the New York Times is reporting on, saying that it's very important that we do this. We're all running on lack of information here, but so many things broke last night. Rudy Giuliani said the State Department asked him to go on a mission to Ukraine, and he's being, as well as he ought to be, he is being hung out to dry because of an interview that he did with Chris Cuomo, where he said, "No, did you see this one?
Yeah.
This is the best. Do you want to contextualize?"
No. Go ahead.
Well, he said to Chris Cuomo, "No, I didn't. This didn't happen, and then it did." Right in the same interview, and now Trump is out there calling Chris Cuomo Fredo. Now, I don't know if you've been listening to the show every single day, but Chris Cuomo of CNN got into, brother of Andrew Cuomo, by the way, son of Mario Cuomo, in the New York Cuomo dynasty here. I wonder how he got his job. Was he at the top of the class? I'm just saying.
Which job?
Chris Cuomo got his job. I'm just saying. I guess you do help your family. What are you going to do? Anyway, Chris Cuomo's on CNN, and Giuliani goes on there. First he says one thing, then within 5 seconds, which is nice. It's like a really great clip on the internet. He says the opposite thing. No, I never said that. And then Trump is out there defending, saying Giuliani did a great job, and calling Chris Cuomo Fredo, which is a reference to the Godfather's character Fredo, who he was sick as a child and then wasn't, he wasn't the sharpest tack in the box, and he was always sort of in his brother's shadow. And people went crazy the first time, saying it was a slur against Italian Americans, which it's not. We happen to have Fredo here on the show with us. Fredo, what's the problem that you're always complaining about?
I can handle things. I'm smart. Not like everybody says. Like dumb, I'm smart, and I want respect.
By the way, I'm playing that for my husband today. It is our wedding anniversary. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary to you.
Yes, we're celebrating with an enormous party right here in the studio. He's not here. He's at home taking care of our child.
Yeah, can we show champagne consumption on the
I'm not
live stream?
certain. No, but we've decided to celebrate. We're going to see if we can make it through The Godfather, just quoting The Godfather, but doing the entire movie, because I think we can. We have seen it so many times. But if you are listening, dear, happy anniversary, and thank you for the many years of wedded bliss that we are seeing. We're going to listen to... So let's quickly go over what's happening here. Anyway, Mike Pompeo was very quick to defend Rudy Giuliani's role in urging the Ukraine president to investigate Donald Trump's political enemy in exchange for a few $100 million in aid, because Pompeo was in it up to his eyeballs. I've got a clip of Rudy Giuliani on Hannity. Can we play that? I think we can. That the State Department actually asked him to get involved with Ukraine and push for corruption investigations aimed at implicating the Bidens. So here we are, admitting. Not that you can't get enough of Rudy
Let's
Giuliani.
talk. You've been involved. Let's first confirm John Solomon's report. You didn't get involved in this on your own. Did our State Department ask you to go on a mission for them?
They did. I was called
you were
by
a citizen and you went.
The State Department called me and said, would I take a call from Mr. Yermak, who's number 2 or 3 to the president-elect, now the president. I was put together with Mr. Yermak. I talked to him. He gave me enormously important facts. I conveyed them all to the State Department. Unlike the media lies, fake news.
Then I went home and I ate a big steak, and I continued to contribute to the downfall of society. That's what I did. That's Rudy Giuliani.
It's just like old times. Double speak, talking out of both sides of his mouth.
Yeah, that's his mouth that he's talking out of. His mouth there. Anyway, this story is clearly unfolding, but people are calling more for impeachment than they have been. So hopefully we'll see. Even Nancy Pelosi's using her strongest possible language, which is very muted, polite language that she's been using. Whereas Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, bless her, has said that the real scandal here is not so much what's happening with the Republicans, but with the Democrats' failure to not only just start the impeachment proceedings, but actually impeach this president. I mean, he's broken all these laws and rules, and now he's doing it with even more impunity. By the way, this Ukraine thing happened while Mueller was testifying, like almost in the exact same moment that Mueller was testifying. So this is like right in our faces, people, right in our faces. Now, where were you yesterday that you got to hang out with Angela Davis?
Well, I had planned to check out the other demonstration we had talked about, and I realized it wasn't going to be possible to do both. So I went straight up to Riverside Church, where Angela Davis spoke to a large crowd. And the event was sponsored by the National Conference of Black Lawyers, the New York chapter. Full disclosure, I'm a member of the chapter.
Really?
And so she talked about all the things that she usually does, including the influence of her mother on her becoming an activist, on the generation prior to her. I never knew that her mother was an activist herself. But what we have here for you is her talking about the role of abolition.
Ever since the invention of this repressive institution we call the prison, there have been critiques and there have been calls to abolish it. But it was especially around the late 60s and early 70s when a serious conversation about abolition began to develop. And I mentioned that when the Attica Rebellion took place, many of the brothers who participated in the rebellion were calling for the abolition of prisons. And it was taken seriously. If one looks at the New York Times during that period, there were articles and commentaries even by judges. The problem is that somehow the radical impact of abolition has been absorbed by the mainstream, and it has been turned into a call for the simple reform of jails and prisons. And I think we're witnessing that now with people even like Newt Gingrich some years ago who began to call for increased attention to the prison system and what did he call? What was the name of the organization? The Right on Crime. Yeah, Right on Crime. I guess that's what he was actually saying. But anyway, so I think that this myopic examination of the prison system and our tendency to even talk about it as only an issue of criminal justice allows us to be harnessed into a situation where it only becomes a question of dealing with jails and prisons, and we don't think about the larger context. We don't think about, what has happened in terms of the deterioration of education, and what is the relationship between labor struggles, and what is the connection with housing and education. And an abolitionist perspective really is an attempt to think about what we would need to, how we would need to change our entire worlds, our entire societies, in order to guarantee that we do not depend on the repressive work of the prison. What we've always said is, what would a society look like that no longer needs to rely on prisons? And unfortunately, we often forget that. And I think that right here in New York, Rikers should have been closed down. How long have we been making the demand to close down Rikers?
King, what would a society look like that doesn't rely on prisons?
Very interesting question. Well, first, an overwhelming majority of the people would get the counseling and the other kinds of things that they need, and they would be put on more of a probation type situation where they would get employment, they'd get health care. What to do with the last few people would probably be something that resembles more hospitalization than being locked up in a cage. And
did you see the Michael Moore's movie where he, I think it was one of the, Where Do We Invade Next? It was the most recent movie where he went to different places where we had gotten good ideas from, or where we might get good ideas. That was the whole, it wasn't about war. And he went to one of the Nordic countries, I believe it. Did you see this?
No, but I've seen clips from those countries.
And it showed what the rehabilitation of prison, or quote unquote prison, looked like. I mean, these guys were living together in a house, learning how to cook and have to deal with each other. And, it wasn't horrendous. It was actually for rehabilitation, which would be better for society, don't you think, than putting people in a place where they're just going to get degraded further and then eventually letting them out or letting them die.
I believe the country was Norway, but the maximum security prison, the cells looked like apartments. They had refrigerators, they had stoves, people could eat real food. They didn't have to fry bologna on their bed using a lighter with hair grease as the oil, which is what people are doing. They had a rock climbing wall, and they had a big garden.
You could go outside.
They had a garden with trees, just the trees were skinny so that nobody could hide behind them. But all of this, it was just interesting. They had a whole path that they could walk on.
We would have
and all
to change,
that.
as Angela said, bless her, we would have to change our whole society, because the thinking would be here. Oh, you do a crime and then you get to go live in paradise. Well, I have to live in this public housing and I never did any crime. The whole of society would have to change in order to. And then, of course, people making money off of throwing innocent people in prison, or throwing people in prison for minor crimes, or what's considered a crime, or was considered a crime until marijuana became legalized. It wouldn't be a moneymaker. So there'd be far less people in the prisons.
Yeah, well, this prison industrial complexes involve so many billions, and they just don't want to let go. They don't want to let go.
I think it starts here with us, King, with the visualization of what society would look like. We have to think about what would society look like in another way. I think that is another thing Occupy did. They said, oh, another world is possible. What was that about? Another world is possible. Well, what is it? What does it look like? And if you're into New Age spirituality, you have to visualize the thing. You have to even be able to see it before you can work toward it, for example.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's why we're both on the...
Well, what did they used to say? I'm checking the list. Free your mind and your ass will follow.
Absolutely fabulous. You're listening to Waking Up on WBAI 99.5 FM. I'm Juliana Forlano in the studio with King Downing. It is mostly sunny. 79 degrees is going to be the high today. It is currently 67. Sunny to partly cloudy today. Tonight, mostly clear. A low of 61 degrees. Tomorrow, Wednesday, again, sunny, high of 79, and then 64 at night. Thursday, again, it's like almost the same day over and over. 81 degrees on Thursday and mostly sunny. A little bit of showers possible Thursday night, which is great because we are in, it's not a drought, but we haven't had even in 1 inch of rain over the course of this month, and we usually have around 3 or more. Friday, again, sunny, 77 degrees. 81 degrees on Saturday and mostly sunny. Sunday, partly cloudy. So your worst possible day is going to be 78 degrees and partly cloudy. Gosh, we are living lucky up here in the Northeast, given what's happening in all these other areas. We have now over to your labor history in 2, one of our favorite segments here on Waking Up.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1969. President Richard Milhous Nixon issued the Philadelphia Plan. The goal of the plan was to require building trades unions to admit black members into their ranks. Nixon believed this would show him as a civil rights supporter without having to give in to the more radical demands of the civil rights movement. Affirmative action opponents sued to kill the plan, but they were unsuccessful. Prior to the introduction of the Philadelphia Plan, construction unions nationwide were almost exclusively white. Throughout the 1960s, black workers organized to demand access in construction trades in many northern cities. In Philadelphia in 1967, black workers protested to integrate construction work. This led to federal attention and Nixon's plan. The plan required 6 Philadelphia building trades to create numerical goals for integrating their locals. They had to meet those goals to get federal contracts. Many white construction workers nationwide opposed the plan. Construction workers in Pittsburgh and Chicago held protest rallies. In practice, Nixon had very little interest in strong enforcement of his plan. He wanted to use it to defend himself when critics attacked his administration's civil rights record. Civil rights leaders saw through Nixon's charade. Real progress in desegregating construction work was very slow, and the Nixon administration did little to change that. Still, Nixon's plan was a step, however small, at integrating the building trades. Another important step was the founding of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists in September of 1972 in Chicago. Today, the organization has members in more than 1,200 locals and works to increase and support black members of trade unions. Today, integration of the trades remains an incomplete project.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you, Rick. You're listening to Waking Up. I'm Juliana Forlano. So Newark says that the water crisis is easing, that the lead filters are proving mostly effective, I guess, according to the New York Times. So take it for what you will. Weeks of testing showed good news, but the city will continue to distribute the bottled water. These are, thousands of water filters have been handed out. Bottled water is still going to be made available. Officials say the crisis that had gripped the city for months seemed to be easing. Now, I would keep drinking that bottled water if you can. Testing done jointly by city, state, and federal officials found that the filters had been 97% effective at reducing lead levels to below federally acceptable standards. Are those standards good? Well, meaning 97% of the tests showed that filters are working properly. I mean, I do my own water, and it's supposed to be good where I live, but I still use a filter.
Yeah, and when I went over there to cover the protests at the Video Music Awards, some of the activists who were plaintiffs in the case said that they had issues with the way that the federal government was applying the standards. They said they were using this thing called the 90th percentile, which means they eliminate the worst 10% of the levels and only look at the 90%. He said that 10% are still people who are drinking the water and they're still being poisoned.
Yeah,
So
if there's one person being poisoned, it's not a solution.
So to just cut the worst 10% off and say the levels are going down, then we don't know what's happening with that other
The state
top group.
said they set safe lead levels for testing in Newark at 10 parts per billion. Not that that means much unless you're a scientist, but the benchmark established by the EPA is 15 parts per billion. Because 3% of the results showed rates above the level set by the state, bottled water would be provided to anyone who wants it, by the way. And scientists are saying there's no safe amount of lead in water. Zero.
Right.
High blood lead levels lead to stunt a child's mental development and damage organs in children and adults, but even smaller amounts can affect a child's intellectual development. And I think something interesting about this is that the New York, let's see, I think it's realtors.com. I don't want to quote, but one of these sort of realists, oh, no, I get people wanting to come on the show, emailing me press releases. And one of the folks from like a Newark real estate agency emailed me a press release saying, did you know that the people are moving to Newark? They're going to gentrify Newark, and Newark is the hottest up-and-coming market outside of New York City. Buy now, blah, blah, blah. Would you like me to come on the show and talk about this? And I said no, but I did read the thing because, I'm of interest of what people are saying. And I just think it's very interesting that this lead crisis is certainly going to put the kibosh on the gentrification, let's say, of Newark. And they're trying to sell. So someone out there now is trying to sell Newark as the next hot market. Not saying bad things about Newark, but, watch out. They're going to put a Jamba Juice in, and then you're going to be priced out of your neighborhood. I don't think, how can they both be reporting lead in the water and Newark's the next hot place to go and live? I mean, are people not paying attention?
I think that they're doing desperate damage control.
Let's open up the phone lines, 212-209-2877. Our phone lines are open. We're happy to be taking your calls about this Biden situation, this Newark situation, and whatever's on your mind. If you want to criticize the show, maybe you could just email me. That would be kind of better. We don't want to, we're doing the show. So 212-209-2877, 212-209-2877. Our phone lines are open. Yeah, so that's what's happening there.
So another little...
we got a message from the king?
Yeah, we do.
A message from the king, a message from the king, a message from the king.
Please, keep your firstborn.
I really can't get enough of this.
So the Emmys were in the news today, and it relates to us because of the fact that when they see us, the
Yes.
docudrama about the Central Park Five got 16 nominations, and Gerald Jerome, who played Corey Wise, won an Emmy, easy for you to say,
nice,
for outstanding lead actor in a limited series or movie. So props to him. But on the other hand, there's been a lot of talk around the fact that When They See Us got 16 nominations and only won this one. And so there's been a little buzz around whether there was any unfairness involved in that. But we'll leave that to maybe the callers. Maybe folks want to talk about that. But congratulations to Gerald Jerome.
That's so exciting.
And the other thing was, you should see the picture of the Central Park Five, all at the Emmys, wearing their tuxedos and their finery, posing with Ava.
It's fabulous.
So
that's so exciting.
It's a great turn for their lives.
Gosh, we have so much going on here. We have a caller on the line. Caller, your name and where you're calling from?
Yes, my name is Eddie. I'm calling from Patterson, New Jersey.
Oh, hi, Eddie. Thanks for the call.
No problem.
What would
So,
you
yeah,
like
I
to say?
kind of wanted to make a comment about that gentrification in Newark.
Yeah.
So the way I was thinking when you guys were talking is like it's kind of a perfect situation for somebody to kind of change the demographic. You put a lot of lead in the water, or you kind of release.
Oh, yes. I see where you're going.
After you spend all this money on the fixing all the stuff, then you can raise prices. So
Interesting.
When you raise taxes and when you raise properties, a lot of people that can't afford it move out of the place.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at old, like a lot of places in New Jersey, like Franklin Lakes. Franklin Lakes used to be farms back in the day. Now it's like it's untouchable. Like it's very expensive to live there, and, and I'm talking about maybe 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago.
Yeah, Eddie, good point.
So,
That's very interesting. You just can't
maybe
know.
it's a strategy. Maybe it's a strategy. Maybe it's a way to kind of,
Sure.
I guess make
get people out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which
that's.
is kind of-
I hope not.
Yeah.
That would be
I hope
horrendous.
not too, but-
We've seen horrendous things in the past, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Because they wanted to make Newark the capital of New Jersey at one point, and then it didn't work out that way. So I know these investors are still trying different strategies.
Yeah, definitely.
And-
Because I know, there's from Brooklyn, where if you're not able to afford Brooklyn anymore, there's real estate agents coming around saying you can afford Maplewood, you can afford South Orange, which you can't anyway. And those are Newark adjacent. They're just outside of Newark, and so those areas are going to definitely slide into Newark from the west. I can't see how this is not going to happen. I guess we'll keep our eye on it. Thanks for the call, Eddie. Appreciate it. We have other callers coming in. Let's open up the phone lines, 212-209-2877. Caller, you are on the air on Waking Up with Juliana and King. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hi, my name's Mike. I'm calling from New Jersey.
Hi, Mike.
Hi. I wanted to come back to what you were talking about earlier before you opened up the phone lines, the whole abolition of prisons.
Yeah.
I don't actually believe that the abolition of prison is a possibility entirely, simply because there are always going to be
Jeffrey Dahmer.
people who are going to need to be kept away from society for one reason or another. I think abolishing prison as a punitive tactic is certainly a necessity. But I think a prison as a means of public safety will
Absolutely.
always be.
I agree. King?
Well, I think and I appreciate your point, and I know what you're saying. A lot of people say that. I think the critical thing is, as soon as you use the word prison, you're talking about a punitive institution that has cage-like qualities, doesn't provide for nutrition or health. And so it means abolishing the whole idea and coming up with something else.
Something else to deal with the problem of.
Yeah.
But there are people who need to be kept away from society.
Well, keeping people away from society could be something like we saw in Norway. I mean, a person could have a fully functioning apartment. They could have television, movies. They could have job skills. They could be doing work that doesn't involve them interacting with other people while they're on a full course of treatment, with the idea of rehabilitation, which is just not what happens in this system. So we strike the word and we say we've got to come up with something completely different. As soon as you say people are at risk to other people.
Is there another word?
What's that?
Because we need that. Have people in the activist community.
I think to come up with a vision like we were doing before will create a word that defines something.
Let's think about
something
it. We
new.
could do that here.
Yeah.
I came up with feel the burn. We could do that, and that went pretty far. I'm not kidding. Let's think about it.
Thanks for the call,
thanks for the
Mike.
call, Mike. Let's think about that, and if callers have ideas, we could talk about that. Time out. That's what we do with toddlers. Like, no, you can't, do that behavior. So you're banished, and that doesn't mean we're gonna torture you.
You still have your toys. You still have some food.
Yeah.
You still get hugs.
Well, not the toys. You can't.
Oh, timeout's
You
no
can't
toys.
send them into like that's what I did. I couldn't take. I'm a softie. I couldn't take doing the timeout, so I made a little timeout area that was like a palace, and then she started just going in there, and I'm like, I don't think this is gonna have.
See, recidivism
Exactly.
starts early.
The timeout. The idea is like you got to think about what you did and let's cool out and make better decisions. And if you can't do that, and you're not showing you're able to do that, then you stay in timeout. But as you said, there's food. 212-209-2877. We are blowing through our musical breaks because we are live streaming and Alana has a cold. So we banished her to a timeout up front because we don't want to all be breathing in and out. Alana's, whatever she caught, some bug. And so therefore, no music today. We'll have to hold on till tomorrow. Caller, you are on the air. Your name and where you're calling from.
Bear from the Bronx.
Hi. Thanks for the call.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I want to touch on the lead situation.
Yeah.
And I think I think the U.S. as a whole has a very poor. They haven't invested wisely in the long term of infrastructure and changing the pipes with the lead. That's from the past. That was in place from the 1900s and what forth. So, like for example, in Clifton, New Jersey, the Passaic Valley Water Commission was offering free lead tests in your house. But if it comes up positive, it's the homeowner's responsibility to replace the pipes.
Oh, so if you say, yeah, I'll take the test, then you sign a thing that says free test as long as you take responsibility. Wow. That is disgusting.
So when it comes to Newark or other lower income cities, right? So I think it's bigger than just that. I think it's more of a national issue that the mainstream or the people are not really talking about. And in the long run, it's gonna be a damaging effect on our children and our future.
Absolutely.
It's not, the Newark, the poor areas, especially minority areas that don't have the ability. They do have the ability, but they're not mentally focused on organizing and strategizing on how to get these politicians to understand their issues, because perhaps they're busy doing other things. But until people awaken from their ways of slave mentality thinking, not just black or white, across the board, then nothing is going to change. Lead is going to continue to be this way. We're going to continue to invest in prisons and not infrastructure. We're going to continue to invest in wars and not building our future. And that's just the bottom line. It comes down to the will of the people. If they're willing to stand up and invest their time, not on Jay-Z, Lil Wayne, and Puff Daddy, but on themselves and their children. That's the only way to do it.
Thank you so much for that call. I appreciate it. It's nice to hear people out there like that. That kind of attitude. King?
Yeah, I'm just sorry that he just singled out the rappers because, there's a whole lot of other entertainment that people are putting their money into. But I agree with everything else you're saying. And every time people talk about infrastructure, a lot of times the politicians and people who bring it up just look at it as this broad word. But when you say infrastructure, you mean the money to replace the pipes in a city and all kinds of other small things that the 1% is able to hold on to their wealth to not deal with.
There's always, it always never ceases to amaze me what we do here in this country, right here in Brooklyn. They put a Whole Foods on a brownfield site. I talk about that a lot. People don't know. And people don't know. I think one of the things I've noticed is that we don't trust that the agencies are telling us the truth. On a broader scale, WBAI listeners have been kind of hip from the outset. That's how we got to WBAI, or at least once we got here, we started questioning things. But I think it's a more broad thing that's happening where people are really questioning, and you have to do your own research these days in any number of areas. It was really great to hear what the last caller just said about people having to get active. Yesterday, again, we saw an unprecedented escalation in the fight for climate justice. Greta, as we talked about at the beginning, Thunberg, and 15 other young people filed that potentially world-changing climate complaint. It states that world governments are violating children's rights under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. The teenage plaintiffs who filed the complaint are from all over the world, and each has dealt with the stifling impacts of climate change. We're speaking today with reporter Brian Kahn about what this all means. Brian is the managing editor of Earther and a lecturer for Columbia's Masters in Climate and Society. Brian, thanks for joining us on the program today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Can you talk about the lawsuit that the 16 teenagers from all over the world filed? How does it allege the countries named as defendants are harming them?
Well, it alleges that, they're basically these 5 countries named in it are responsible for causing the climate crisis through their carbon emissions. And so they're, basically they're filing a complaint asking these countries for relief, basically asking the UN to A, declare that climate change is a crisis, and then that B, the 5 countries named in the suit have to give them relief, which means, essentially that they need to start cutting their emissions and work internationally in cooperation with other countries that are not named in the suit to create binding emissions reductions targets.
What are those countries that are named? I'm assuming we're one of them.
We are not, in fact.
What? Greta! What a bummer.
There's a reason why. So the countries named are Argentina, Brazil, France, Germany, and Turkey. Those 5 countries have signed something that's called the Third Protocol to United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child, which is a mouthful. But what it basically means is that these countries, along with 44 or so others, are all party to this sort of semi-legal court where children can bring their complaints to this committee of 18 experts. And if the committee finds that the countries that have been complained against are violating children's rights, they can then issue a verdict essentially asking those countries to act to rectify the situation. So the U.S. did not sign this optional protocol, but these 5 did, and they're all part of the G20. Yeah, so...
Wait, hold on, just quickly, when did that come up? When was that put into law? What administration were we under when we decided?
2014, so it was under the Obama administration.
Oh.
And this, the Convention on the Rights of the Child dates back to, the 90s, in fact. So that's, this has been around a while, and the U.S. is a signatory to that. They're just not a signatory to this optional protocol.
Boo. That's children booing. I've been waiting to use that sound effect.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very sadly excited about that. Can you talk about the weight that a win in this lawsuit might hold?
Yeah, well, if they do win this complaint, and if this committee does find that these countries are in fact violating children's rights because of their carbon emissions, a win means that the UN declares a climate crisis, which is a big step. We're seeing this sort of take place in countries around the world. The UK has done it, Canada has done it. Now this would be an international declaration, which would be a pretty big deal. But more importantly, it kind of forces these countries to pick a side. They can choose to leave this convention if they want for rights of the children, which is a pretty bad look, or they can begin to start drawing down their emissions and working in cooperation with other countries around the world to do the same and set these binding international agreements, which is something that we really haven't seen. Like, for example, the Paris Agreement, that's a non-binding agreement. This would change the calculus and make the commitments any countries make binding to future agreements.
How would this affect the United States?
Well, right now, it doesn't have a huge effect on the United States. If, this lawsuit does succeed, or if this complaint does succeed, I should say, then, the U.S. is part of the international community, even if they're not signatory to this part of this one convention. So these 5 countries would then be compelled to work with other countries that are not signatories. So the U.S., is in theory one of those countries that these countries could reach out to draw into binding emissions reductions agreements or agreements to, fund adaptation mechanisms or other ways to deal with the impacts of climate change. So at the moment, not a lot to do with the U.S. In the future, depending on how things go, it could change a lot of things in terms of the relationship with the U.S. and the rest of the world.
Do you have any examples of this process being used by children in the past and what came out of it?
No, this is a pretty new thing. It's, it was created in 2014, so this will be the first major test of it. We have seen, certain cases, like there's a case in the U.S. called Juliana versus the U.S. where it's a bunch of young adults.
Just saying. I wish it was.
Juliana. Although, feel free to sign on. But there are these cases, nationally where we've seen kids suing their national governments. This really is the first case where we've seen kids bring a complaint in international court asking governments to provide, a solution to climate change.
There is a rightward march, including the government of Brazil, Bolsonaro. It doesn't seem like he and his, fascist adjacent cronies would mind so much just pulling out of the child rights agreement that was clearly put in by one of his predecessors.
Yeah, I mean, it is a possibility. I think that what you're seeing with these climate strikes and now with this lawsuit and all the other things happening with young adult activism is so basically, they're telling adults to choose the side. Are you going to be on the side of the kids and the future generations? Or are you going to be on the side of making the last few quick bucks out of the fossil fuel industry? And so, it's very possible that Brazil could pull out, but I think that that's what sort of makes this suit really interesting. It's a very clarifying moment for all sorts of folks across the political spectrum.
We're speaking with Brian Kahn, managing editor of Earther and lecturer for Columbia's Masters in Climate and Society. Brian, what do you make of the giant climate strike protests and the fact that Greta Thunberg made that very rousing speech on the floor of the UN?
I mean, I've been working in the climate field for about a decade now, and I will say that to me, the energy feels very different right now than it ever has. That's both because of the climate strikes, it's because of climate champions you're seeing in Congress, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Green New Deal. There are these solutions that are being proposed. And there's this argument, I think, for a long time we've seen climate as kind of this, niche environmental problem. And, doing this for a decade, I can tell you it's not that, but I think that it's taken a while for, the press and people in general to kind of wake up to the fact that it's an everything problem. And now you're seeing these leaders putting forward these ideas that, no, in fact, it is an everything problem. We need to, combat climate change. And in doing that, we need to address inequality. We need to, at least in the U.S., address healthcare. There are all these sort of interlocking issues that we need to consider. And so right now what I see with these strike movements is the fact that they are bringing up all these interlocking issues in ways that, we haven't heard before. So, whether that means everything turns out, the way we want it to is up for debate. But the energy right now and the demands that are being put forward are very different than what we've heard in the mainstream, protest movements around climate ever.
Is there any possibility that all of this action around the world would lead to some pressure on the U.S. to accept the additional protocol? And do you know if there are any moves like that are afoot already?
I haven't heard anything yet. I've had a chance to interview at least one of the U.S. plaintiffs. There's two plaintiffs on this case from the U.S., and I've talked with a lot of them. It doesn't sound like they're making any particular push on it at this point, but this is an international process. Sometimes these can take a little while, so there may be a push to do that. Whether you have the ability, or whether the Trump administration is the administration to do that, is of course another question altogether. But there are avenues for public pressure in the future, so we could see them activated.
We're speaking with Brian Kahn. Brian, thanks for joining us on the program today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for covering this topic.
No, it's really important, and we continue to cover it, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again sometime.
I would absolutely love to. Thank you again.
You're welcome. You're listening to Waking Up. I'm Juliana Forlano. It is a beautiful day here in New York City. To my right is King Downing.
To the left of your right, or to the right of your left?
I don't know. I'm not sure how it goes. Maybe it's issue by issue. 68 degrees outside and sunny, going up to 79 degrees. Our phone lines are open, 212-209-2877, 212-209-2877. So, this whole Biden thing, because it seems to me like that Trump was so successful being like, we should lock Hillary up for those emails. Yes, I am, a horrible, dastardly individual in so many ways. As our caller pointed out yesterday, New York all knew this about him. Now the rest of the country is finding out. But Hillary's emails, and they're trying to do that with Biden. They're doing the same playbook with Biden. And I'm sure his people are going to fall for it. They're just giving people that same exact bone that they gave them last time. They're going to say, but what about Biden's kids? What about Biden's emoluments clause? What about Biden? Blah, 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 blah. And I know a wonderful way that we can avoid this whole thing is not running Vice President Biden as the person of the Democratic Party. Why don't we run someone a little cleaner? Perhaps a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren, who, used to teach preschool. I can't imagine that she's got the ton of skeletons in her closet. The one misspeak about the Native American thing, and all hell breaks loose. Meanwhile, Trump is friends with Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, come on, people.
Well, I like your point, because one of the issues that so many people have had is driven people from the Democratic Party are the Bidens. And when you have Trump doing something that he's investigating and trying to put pressure on the Ukraine government to expose something that it looks like Biden also did, that Biden also tried to withhold the same funds in order to push.
Was that true?
It's an allegation, and
but I don't think that's accurate.
Well, there's a quote where he says that he did put pressure on them. He just doesn't say why.
Yeah.
But if he threatened to withdraw the monies to end the prosecutor's investigation of the company where his son had an active role, then that's a problem with both parties with the center of both parties, and it means that what
Exactly,
we
the
want to do,
two-party system, like the
what
guy
we
who
want to
called
do,
in
what you
yesterday.
said, which is to move towards the progressive wing, because the center part of the Democratic Party
It's
is doing
rotten.
very similar things to what the Republicans are doing.
Thank you. A new poll, by the way, showing Senator Elizabeth Warren is leading Vice President Joe Biden in Iowa, and this is shaking up those corporate money people and the Democratic nomination battle. Insiders across the party are gaming still what it all means. Warren currently has 22% support to Biden's 20%, and that is while Senator Bernie Sanders is still in the race. I imagine if Senator Sanders were to drop out, I'm not sure his percentage points would go over to Biden. I'm just saying. I'm pretty sure they would go to Warren, or they would hold their noses and go home, which I hope to God they wouldn't. Just like if Warren were to drop out, her votes are not likely to go to one of the corporatist candidates. They're more likely to go to Bernie Sanders. So, yeah, we've got that. Anyway, the two are well clear of the rest of the field, which Sanders is in third place. He has 11%, by the way. Hey, this could be good news, this slight smearing of Biden. But I don't put it past. By the way, our phone lines are open. I know we have a call on there, 212-209-2877. I don't put it past the corporate Democrats to say, that's fine, we'll still run Biden. And then all of the sort of sourness that this is going to leave in the mouths of purist voters, which we have far too many of on our side, or purist non-voters, is going to just be one more nail in the coffin that gets Trump re-elected, along with Russia and the election fraud that was discussed on this program or on this station yesterday when Michael had on Greg Palast. We have callers on the line. Let's open it up. Caller, you are on the air. Your name and where you're calling from?
Hey, is that me?
It's you. Hi.
Oh, it's me. Hi, how you doing?
Charlie.
Listen, Yeah, how you doing?
I'm good.
And King Downey and Michael G. Haskins in the background, how you doing? Listen.
We're all good because
Bernie.
we kicked Alana out.
And
of the
Alana
studio.
in the other room.
Yeah, she's got a cold. We're like, sit up front, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just getting over a cold.
Oh, feel better.
Listen, go Bernie. I'm worried about Elizabeth Warren because she has some corporate ties. But that's not what I'm calling
They
her.
all have
Listen,
corporate ties. You know, every time you call in here, you say something nice and progressive that we want to hear, and then you try to poison our minds against another progressive person. Who doesn't
sorry.
have corporate ties?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Anyway,
Listen,
go ahead.
You are a progressive, okay? You
Am I?
do some excellent shows. Are you kidding? It bothers me. It bothers me that you're upset over this. Listen, there are millions of great progressives in our country. When I say we don't have a progressive movement, I mean we don't have a collective progressive movement. But that's not what I'm calling about.
Oh, so we're
okay.
talking
I was in Holland.
Go ahead, Charlie.
I was in Amsterdam last month, okay, and I asked about the water there to some Dutch girl, okay.
Some
and she
Dutch
said,
girl,
well,
huh? Was she wearing like the thing? You know, the Dutch girl.
You know, but anyway, she says the water's. She says the water's okay.
Did she have a paint can?
Wooden shoes.
I want to put a head in the can.
Joint.
But,
what?
Yeah, no, some of those kids there are like the Hitler Youth. But anyway, she says the water's okay over there, but, when you go down to Portugal, it's not. But some of those youth, I was talking to people, but, I love politics and stuff, so I'm talking to people in Amsterdam, and I'm asking what's going on, and I noticed some chauvinistic nationalism.
Really?
Particularly with the youth. Yes, some arrogance with the youth. Some of the youth did not respect the tourists at all. I call them like they hit the youth. I mean, maybe I shouldn't go all the way and say that, but these were nasty kids.
What did they do
and
to
of course, when you... they were just like very disrespectful.
Yeah, well.
Very, very disrespectful. Oh, yeah. Not like you see in New York.
I think that's happening. Oh, yeah, no, everyone's very respectful in New York.
And and I'm speaking to people, and they're all against the tourists, because all the tourists there are people of color. Not only are the people of color coming up in the world to the north, but they're coming up in status, too. And I think that bothers them. But listen, hey, the majority of Dutch people who are good, decent people, no matter where you go in the world.
So you're saying that the Dutch are Nazis. It's the bottom line, is what you're saying.
No.
But they have clean
I
water.
hate when you do this. I hate when you do this. No, the Dutch are good, decent people. The majority of the Dutch. What I saw there was a tint of... I can understand how Hitler grew up over there.
Charlie, does this have anything to do with anything we were talking about today? I appreciate it.
I love Bernie. How's that? Okay.
Oh, I hear you. Well, thanks for the call.
Okay.
I appreciate it. He's got
Okay,
11%
bye-bye.
plus you. That's good. I also love Bernie. It's tough. It's heartbreaking, this whole idea, but I do think Elizabeth Warren is more electable.
Maybe the people over there don't like Americans. I mean, there's a good
Maybe they
reason
just don't
why
like
they don't like
Charlie.
American tourists. Yeah. I was going to give to Charlie a pass.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks for calling, Charlie. We know you tried to call yesterday and we didn't get a chance to get you in. 212-209-2877. That is our phone line. We're just about to talk to Jack Devine from Revolutions Per Minute, our 5 p.m. show here on WBAI as Michael G. tries to get him up on the line. I wonder what they're going to talk about. What a great show title, Revolutions Per Minute. I'd like to play their music, but every time we do, the live stream cuts out on on Facebook. Are we ready? We got Jack on the line. Hi, Jack. How's it going?
That's good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for joining us. What's happening on Revolutions Per Minute tonight at 5 p.m. WBAI?
So tonight we're going to have two members of NYC DSA's Socialist Feminist Working Group.
Ooh.
We're going to kind of talk about how that emerged within the organization.
So the Bernie Bros are coming on, is what the Bernie Bros are coming on.
Exactly.
It was mostly women who supported Bernie. That was a majority of women. That whole thing was a schmear. Anyway, go ahead, Jack.
Oh no, 100%. Yeah, that's been a targeted attack on the Sanders campaign. But no, we are having two of our leading organizers who have also worked to put in a gender dynamic survey for the organization to take, because it's obviously as you were saying, the Bernie Bros smear was completely false. But in any space in our society, there is sexism because we live in a patriarchal society. So there needs to be effort to deal with it. So we are, as an organization, taking steps, and these two individuals took the lead in this fight to have this survey. So we're going to be discussing that and kind of the future of the Socialist Feminist Working Group, the potential work towards a strike for reproductive justice, and a whole lot more.
Well, I think that's great. And I was, there's often conversations about how groups don't respect this group or that group, organizations, government in general. And it's really wonderful to see these two guests. I look forward to your show saying, you might not respect us in the way we need to respect, but I'm going to go inside the system and change it from within. I like that idea. So I'm excited to hear what they're going to have to say. What are their names, Jack?
It's Jen and Alexandra.
Are they sisters? They have, or are they?
No.
Okay.
I haven't gotten clarification on willingness to use last names.
I see. I see. Okay, that makes sense.
They're two good comrades of mine, but I always like to double check first.
How dare you be a responsible journalist in this day of Trump and fake news? You're supposed to disrespect everyone. Jack, thanks.
Throw them to the wall.
Exactly. Thanks a lot, Jack. I appreciate it. The show is Revolutions Per Minute. It is on at 5 p.m. here on WBAI. You can also listen to it everywhere on WBAI.org at any time. Thanks, Jack. I appreciate it. Our phone lines are lighting up. Let's see if we can take another call as we head into the end of this beautiful fall day. Again, it is in the high 60s right now, going up to the high 70s, and no rain in sight. Caller, your name and where you're calling from. You are live on the air.
Hello, my name is Ann. I'm calling from Freehold.
Hi, Ann. Thanks for the call.
Oh, you're welcome. I love your show. I just wanted to say I don't think many people know that Elizabeth Warren, has stated that she will not forego big money donors in the primary, but not in the general election. I do not believe.
How is she going to win if she doesn't? How would she win against Trump? He is all of big money.
In other words, you agree with that?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, how will she win?
Just the way Bernie Sanders would try to win, without taking any corporation or PAC money. She is sort of like equivocating, where Bernie is just saying it like it is. I've told people that, and they said she's taking money. Here, if she is going to be fighting these big corporations, how's she going to be taking money from them?
Well, that's a great question. We'll have to look into that, but I do appreciate you calling and letting us know about that.
Well, you can get it, Chris Hayes and the Young Turks.
Yeah, Those guys.
Out of her own mouth.
Out of her own mouth.
Out of her own mouth.
But what are we going to do if we don't? I mean, we're going to have to. The Democrats are going to run a candidate, right? And she is one of the most progressive, whether she takes corporate money or not. I understand the idea that if she says she takes corporate money, she'll be beholden to those corporations. Even if she says one thing, she may flip and do another thing, given that she would be beholden in some way. Is that, but it's, I don't know. We're going to have to try to get him out somehow. And if we impeach him, we're getting Trump.
All I know is one thing. The majority of times these politicians are taking the money from the big corps, and guess what? They say one thing and then they do another.
Well, that has been the history of our entire country.
Yeah.
Yeah, ain't that the truth, Ann? Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. I know, and it's hard. We're not going to find a pure candidate that is going to get through the process. I don't think. Maybe Bernie Sanders. Maybe something will happen. He's still in there. He has 11%. He's number 3. If Biden drops out, he's going to be number 2, and then what? How is the Democratic establishment going to get rid of both of the top 2 candidates for one of the bottom corporate this is all very exciting times. But bottom line, we need to get rid of the Republicans. Am I allowed to say that? That is just my personal opinion and the opinion of many callers. You're listening to Waking Up. It's been a lovely day. I've enjoyed taking the calls. I've enjoyed not having the music breaks, because it gives us more time for calls. We'll be back here tomorrow, 7 a.m., 7 to 8. We hope Alana feels better. Happy anniversary to my babe. And we'll see you in the morning. Have a great day.
On Tuesday, September 24th at 10 p.m., Sugar in My Bowl presents recording artist, vocal